neither one of us are good at waiting. You know,
I have no patience.
we want things to happen, and if they're not happening, we say, well, what can we do to make it happen? When we got married, we both wanted to have a big family. I had always thought, you know, I'd like to have at least 5 kids. One of the big questions I asked him when we met was, what do you think about having a family? Do you want to have kids, and how many? And we both agreed. You know, I wanted at least 5, and he goes, yeah, a pile of them. We want a pile of kids, you know. And so when we got married, we wanted to start a family right away.
And we watched our friends have kids, and you know, was happy for them, but it was like, well, when is it going to be our time? And I watched relatives have kids. I had friends who didn't want to have kids, and I kept on thinking, when's it going to be our time? You know, and it never happened. You know, and we went fertility specialists. You know, we looked at in vitro. We were starting to look at adoption, and it just, everything was like a dead end. Nothing was working.
When we did look into adoption,
well, at first that turned out to be it was like a dead end. It was, one adoption agency was basically non-existent, and the other one had this long waiting list.
Right. So we got to the point, I think it was probably 4 years down the road, where it seemed every road was closed.
Yep.
Every road.
And I just said, you know what, I'm done. I am all done.
And we spent a lot of money. We had a lot of emotional turmoil during that time. And we kind of started even to, I don't know, almost be like our own little islands. You know, Tom dealt with it a little differently than I did.
Oh yeah, I drank a lot of beer. That's what I did. I crawled inside a beer can, crawled away from God for a while. You know, and it's just, you just, like you say, the island is a great way to put it, because you just have this, I don't know, it's not dysfunction, but this turmoil in this house and this anxiety, and you just feel under attack, and you pray to God, and you know the promise is there, but the promise isn't being kept. And at least that's what I'm thinking. It was like everybody's got that little voice in the back of their head, and I know this was Spirit-filled, and you know, it was a moment when I was just basically crying out to God, and he said, Thomas, you can handle this. You can handle this, because I know you can handle this because I made you and I love you. Because I love you, I have plans for you. You know, I get emotional every time I say that, and it just, and that was after I basically just threw everything to him and said, you know, man, I can't do this anymore. I am done. I'm out of patience. I'm out of perseverance. I mean, I know you're there. Where are you? And within 2 months, all of a sudden, hey, this is Catholic Charities. Can you come and see us? We have a little baby boy up here.
And that we had gotten a call that Evan was born, and the birth mother wanted to talk to us. And I did talk to her on the phone and asked her how things went and how she was, and she said she was feeling good and everything. And I said, well, you know, what does the baby look like? And she says, oh, he's beautiful. He's just beautiful. And he's got a little blonde spot on the top of his hair, on his head, and he's got big brown eyes, and he's just beautiful. And I said, well, I'm so glad to hear that. And I said, well, you just keep in touch, you know.
We had to have trust here. This is where it's like, you know, young lady, you got to make this decision. Yeah. And that was a really, really tough couple of weeks, because we didn't know.
Yeah. And she even said, you know, when I talked to her on the phone, she said, I don't know if I can place him with you. And I said, that's fine. I said, you take all the time you need. And it was tough, because we were so close, you know, but, you know, we just had to wait. But I think it was at the 3-week mark where the social worker called and said she's decided to place.
Promise fulfilled.
Yep.
Oh, Oh, it was awesome. I tell you what, when we went and picked him up, and I remember Evan's in the back seat, in his car seat. We had to borrow a car seat. We had nothing. I'm driving down I-94, and I kept on looking in the back seat. Yeah, he's there. I can't get an accident. I can't screw this up. I got to drive careful. Don't get a speeding ticket. And I just felt it was like this huge weight had been lifted off. Because we've had, I'd say, five, I don't know how many years, 5, 7 years, whatever, of just, it was a tough go, of just an emotional roller coaster, up and down, and all of a sudden here, there's a beautiful baby boy we're going home with. And it was awesome, and it's just, he was just a wonderful baby. And I can't describe it. It was just, a weight had been lifted, a promise has been fulfilled, the waiting was worth it, all those things. And it was just, I always wanted to be a dad, Sharon, always wanted to be a mother with lots of kids, and here we are. And then a couple of years later, we get a call, what was it, a year and a half later, 2 years later?
2 years, 4 months later, that we got a phone call, and they said, birth mom's chosen you. We got a little baby boy here. He can be in your home in 10 days. We're like, 10 days? 10 days?
Oh, yeah.
So I was like, okay, what do we do? Yeah, and it really did. It was kind of like a snowball effect.
Mm-hmm.
Once we finally just said, we're done, there's nothing we can do about it. When we finally just threw in the towel, that's when it just busted open. He just,
seriously,
one thing after another. It was just, wow, okay. And
we had a hard time catching up as fast as God was moving, because a 10-day adoption, I was remodeling the house, I had the whole upstairs all tore apart, and all of a sudden, we got another one coming. Yeah, okay, I guess I better get to work,
Yeah.
So, you think about that, God does answer his prayers. At the time I doubted that. I didn't trust that. And he does answer prayers, but he does it on his timetable, not ours or not yours. And his timetable's way better. It really is. And it's just, and I look at this whole thing as, I walked away from God for a while. I did. I wasn't happy with him. But then he came back, and I look and see what a loving God he is. It's amazing.
I've been going through some health issues. We've had some financial issues, but I don't get worked up about that anymore.
Peace.
Because I've seen what he can do. I can see the enormous blessings that he's given us, just with Evan and Bryce.
Yes.
And he's just poured out, those blessings, not only with Evan and Bryce, but with our entire lives,
Yes.
What we do for our living and where we're at right now.
You trust in the Lord because he's got a promise. He has promised he'll answer your prayers, and that was always in the back of my mind. And so therefore, I never let go of that, because that's all I had at the time. Because like I said, I'm looking at infertility, no children, no chance of adoption. It's gone. And all I had was I had to trust. I had to persevere.